I want to show you how I make a swatch for when I knit in the round, so that it looks kind of tidy and you can reuse the yarn afterwards. There's many different ways to make a swatch. In some of the ways you have to cut the yarn so you cannot reuse it later. But this way you will be able to use the yarn. You're going to need a double pointed needle or a circular needle. So with your yarn, as you would have it if you wanted to knit, you're going to slide the knitting across, and it simulates knitting in the round, so you always knit. And then you're going to measure about 4 times the length of what you're knitting. 4 times. And you're going to knit, the first row, you're going to knit with the yarn from the ball. So you knit all the way. And the reason why it's important to make a gauge in the round if you're going to knit in the round is because when you knit in the round, you always knit. You don't do a purl row. So it means your gauge is going to be slightly different. If you knit a small size, maybe it's not a big issue. But if you knit a bigger size, it's going to be, the difference is going to be way bigger. So for example, if your gauge is off by half a stitch, if you're knitting something that is 100 stitches, you can be 5 stitches off. So 5 stitches off, it could be 1 centimeter, 1.5 centimeter. So as you can see, the bigger the garment, the bigger the issue is going to be. So that's why, especially if you have a bigger size, it's more important to be accurate with the swatch. And the bigger the swatch as well, the more accurate it's going to be. So I finished working with knitting with my working yarn. And now I'm going to slide it across. You always slide. When you finish one row, you always slide. And now, sorry for the noise. And now I'm going to knit with the yarn I've left behind. And I should have just enough to knit the full row. And you're going to see that it makes a really neat swatch. And you will be able to reuse the yarn at a later stage. So this is the advantage. And it can be a bit confusing at first, but if you remember to always slide your work to the other side, and one row you're going to knit with the yarn from the ball, and the next row you're going to knit with the yarn you've saved at the back. So we reach the end, and this is how this is what's going to happen. And you see it gets tight here, but I have enough yarn, so it's good. And at the end, because it can be quite loose depending on what yarn you use, and I don't like it, it's too messy, I make a small yarn, a small knot. Oh, I didn't quite leave enough yarn. So it makes everything tighter. And let me see. I didn't. Up. And to continue, up, you've got your working yarn. And the edge are not falling, looks kind of neat. So I slide the work again. So I've got my yarn 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this length. My cable is a bit long, I think. up, and I use the yarn from the ball, up, and knit to the end. And remember to always slide your work to the other side of the circular needle after every row. That way it simulates knitting in the round. So I reach the end of, this is the first row, I guess, of the pattern. And then you slide your work to the other needle. And now you're going to work with the yarn that you saved. Because the yarn from the ball is going to be on the other side. I hope it starts making sense to you. And that way you only have extra yarn on one side of the work. And you don't have to cut anything. And you will be able to reuse the yarn later if you need to. And if you want a super accurate swatch, once you finish knitting it, I would wash it and block it. So you will know exactly how it behaves after it's blocked, if it grows. And of course, the bigger the swatch, the more accurate it's going to be again. So I'm finishing. I'm at the end, and this time I left more yarn, which makes things easier, to be honest. And I just make a knot that is quite loose, so it's easy to undo if I need to. And don't get the yarn from the ball caught in the knot, like this. Et voilà. And I think it's kind of neat, and you can reuse the yarn. So I hope it's useful. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.